Do a couple introductions and then we can get moving into the content here. My name is Shawn Knechtel. I'm the director of the New Jersey region and a principal of Smith Brothers Insurance. My office is located in Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm also acting treasurer of the New Jersey Food Processors, and I had to look it up this morning, but I've been a board member now for 9+ years and enjoying that ride with current president Mark and prior and the rest of the board. Actually, I'm really proud to be a board member and associated with the New Jersey Food Processors at the moment. I always have been, but you know, in prior, I guess, more normal years, we do a lot of getting together and events and you know, networking and making those good professional connections. And you know, with what's going on in our world, I don't have to define it. We're living it. But you know, the board has been highly focused on bringing educational content to members and responding and bringing just in general good information and certainly best practice type procedures and ideas to membership. And you know, with that, that's part of what today is about, clearly. So looking forward to you know, commentating to an extent, and I'll let Phil introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Philip Paulachok. I'm a senior risk management consultant with Eastern Alliance Insurance. We do workman's compensation for the SUSTAIN program and different agencies. We work very closely with the New Jersey Food Processors Association through many of our accounts. So we're here today to help provide a little more information on, as they've said, returning to the new type of normal, hopefully, that we can get to after the COVID-19. So, Shawn?
Yeah, great. So on the screen that you can see up, it says, you'll see SUSTAIN listed in the right-hand corner. I'm with Smith Brothers. I mentioned that before. Clearly, Phil is with Eastern Alliance. So SUSTAIN is essentially it's a New Jersey Food Processors member benefit. So processors and associate members alike have the opportunity to take advantage of that member benefit from a workers' comp standpoint. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And actually, Phil manages all the service plans for participants in that program. So Phil's very used to being around food businesses in general, and sees, I'm sure, a lot of good and a lot of bad in his daily travels, but mostly good, I hope. Anyway, yeah, we're talking today. I think most people are in New Jersey who are on, some perhaps in Pennsylvania, but we've all heard that, you know, Governor Murphy came out with, in the next, hopefully, few days to a week, we're going to hear some more hard date type information on more businesses opening. You know, clearly New Jersey or food processors have been on an essential services type list, both, you know, locally and as deemed by the federal government. So that's a good thing. But there'll be a lot of other businesses moving towards, you know, reopening more specifically, in addition to just trying to work within the current environment. So Phil's going to talk a lot about that. And if we can, you know, any other information or questions that come up along the way, you know, please type them into the chat and I'll work them into Phil's presentation. So take it away, Phil.
Thank you. Again, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. This is, as we said, trying to return to the new normal after COVID-19. A lot of you are on the essential employees, and you've had some crews working throughout everything. But as Shawn says, the governor starts to open things up. New businesses and accounts of yours will reopen, and you'll be able to hopefully expand operations a little more. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with what are we facing? Basically, we're looking at reintegrating our workforce back either into our offices, plant facilities, field operations, depending on what we need to do with sustainable work practices that we're going to be able to provide that safe work environment for them. We also need to look at, hopefully, how can we reduce the potential of introducing or transmitting this infectious disease or other infectious diseases as the future goes on, you know, between our employees, our clients, or even our agency partners. So what we want to do today is hopefully look at some best practices and see what we have seen that is working out there, and maybe a few things that aren't. what we're looking at is basically what is the purpose behind what we're trying to accomplish today. We're looking to be able to provide best practices and guidance to our senior leaderships. How can we reintegrate our staff into this new normal? Right? It's going to involve adaptation and the implement of new strategies. Unfortunately, as we said, we don't know if the normal will ever be back to the old normal, or if we're going to have to put in new things, find out best practices and the best possible way to bring that workflow back, and collaboration between agencies, partners, customers, and even our employees, depending on what happens over the next couple months, year, 2 years down the road. So basically, we're going to look at some things following the national and state health and safety guidelines throughout. First thing we need to start with is how are we going to reintroduce our staff? Let alone our customers and other agencies. Let's just talk about how we can focus on just getting us back up to the new normal. First things we have to decide is who we want to bring back and when. A lot of the guidelines are stating that please, try to do a staggered reintegration without, exposing everybody to everybody at one shot. So what we need to look at is, all right, who's going to benefit us the most to bring back the quickest? Then we need to prioritize, the groups that'll benefit from being the most at the office, the plant, the facility, or even out on the road. Again, once we prioritize those, it helps us determine when to bring them back. Right. The big issue is going to be right now with all the guidelines is the personal protective equipment, the face masks, the gloves, different age social distancing. You're going to hear a lot of that. Are we able and equipped to do that? Is social distancing going to be an issue? Do we have 4 or 5 employees on a plant all within, 2 to 3 feet of each other, or can that operation be spread out over the line? Different things like that will help determine, how we can address these issues in bringing them back. Some things we've seen that are working is the redesigning of lines with different employees, where we've had 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 pickers, peelers, things like that in one general area, is either spreading them out across the line or just cutting back production to where we only need 1 or 2 that can adequately social distance at that point of the line. Another thing is our office employees. This becomes, if we have a small office in our plant facilities, or if we have a large office away from the plant facilities, that's going to determine how you're going to be able to bring people back. Some of the things to consider with the office is sustained sanitation. Generally out on the plant and processing lines, that's not an issue. But in the offices, it may become an issue. Do we have the internal staff to do it? Do we have cleaning services that we can do it? When we bring those cleaning services, can we talk to them, even though we may have a set contract with them, the new expectations that may require renegotiating that contract because of the new guidelines and expectations we may have bringing our office employees back? Can we social distance? This is a big one. You say, oh, no problem. Everybody works in a cubicle. But things we need to look at are stairwells, hallways, elevators. Can we put policies and programs in place for usage of those to account for social distancing? And then the personal protective equipment. Do we have enough of this? We're going to discuss this in a little more detail in a couple of slides, but do we have it? Are we going to have the employees provide it? Are we providing it? And then wellness checks. One of the big things of the guidelines that they're recommending is wellness checks, people with, out having a fever. How can we set this up? Is it adequate? Can we negotiate where all our employees come into 1 to 2 facilities where we can set this up? This can be done through, thermometer checks, non-touch thermometers. And I believe, Shawn, you have a contact that sets up these where it's a station that the employee just walks through. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think a lot of processors may be hearing more about this. But yes, I'm connected to a business who there's a lot of technology for temperature taking, obviously. and some pretty inexpensive stuff. But then there was also more focused technology, more expensive, certainly, meaning in the $7,000 to $10,000 plus range, where you're essentially single point of entry, in terms of employees coming through, and the equipment is set up to, I guess, more accurately measure temperature at the specific point, which is most relevant to COVID-19 based on what experts are stating. So yes, expensive, and my guess is that some of our processing members probably are aware of it. I'm familiar with one that's about to actually kind of start using it in terms of testing it. So, but yes, there's that type of, more expensive, more, technologically based equipment available.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so these are some options that, depending on how the new normal proceeds and what happens over the next couple months, they may, if it becomes looking to be a long-term solution, these may be things we have to look into as different agencies and employees. The next step is field activities, sales calls, different things like that, where we're out visiting customers, suppliers. How are we going to start with this policy? This is a little harder to control because we can't control the environment that the employees are actually physically going into. So we're going to have to put some policies in place and do a little employee trust. So first thing we need to look at, just our travel policies and procedures in general in our practices. Do we have 3-4 employees going out to an account or a supplier on the same vehicle? We may need to look at spreading them out over multiple vehicles now. Again, social distancing where they're going. Is that going to be a possible, or is that going to be, a liability depending on the facility they're going to? Do they have the personal protective equipment that they need once they're out there? Their masks, their gloves, whatever the account may require, or if they're traveling out of state, what does that state require them to be doing during this time? It may be different than New Jersey, Pennsylvania, depending on where they're going. So we'll need to look at what state requirements for the state they're traveling to and make sure they're up to whichever state has the higher standard. We just don't want to assume if they're going from New Jersey to Maryland that they meet New Jersey standards if Maryland standards are higher. We need to make sure that they meet the state that they're going to. Self-wellness checks. Again, we're going to rely on the employees. Say, hey, look, I'm not feeling well. I have a temperature. I can't make this meeting. We may need to send somebody else. We may need to postpone the meeting and look at different options. So we really, especially we all have the employees that they're gung-ho. They want to do whatever it takes to get the job done. But we need to make sure that they understand, hey, I understand and we appreciate you wanting to get the job done. But if you're not in shape to do the job, you need to let us know. Okay. Then we also need to talk to the clients. What are their policies? If we're going out and say everything's fine for us, but they may say, no, hold on, our policy right now is not to allow visitors in. Or if we do allow visitors in, they have to meet these criteria. So we want to check with our clients or whoever we're going out to visit with before we send our employees out there to make sure everybody's on the same page. And
Phil, you must be going through that quite a bit. I know I am today. I know today I have 3 or 4 different calls set up, video conference or just call in type numbers. And tomorrow I know I'm going to go see 2, actually 1 this afternoon I'm going to see in person too. So it really does depend, and I'm sure you're living it too.
Yes. From a risk management, right now we're not visiting clients. We're doing the Zoom meetings and the phone calls, but hopefully at the beginning of June, first week or 2 of June, we hope to be able to get back out to start seeing some of our accounts. And this is what's going to apply is before I schedule those or when I schedule those, I'm going to need to talk to them about, hey, what are your criteria for me to be able to come in and safely visit with you? What makes you comfortable? What do you need me to do? That way, again, we keep that relationship open and everyone feels safe returning to this new normal.
Right.
Okay. Next thing we're looking at is our visitor policy. Are we going to restrict access? Right now, what I'm seeing with a lot of accounts is everybody is locked down. They're restricting visitors both internally and external visitors. By internal, office to office employees, the processors, I have one processor I work with that has a couple different facilities that they're not even allowing the employees to go between the facilities right now. Again, that may be something you may want to look at as you start. If we do have visitors come in, are we going to subject them to a wellness check? And if so, to what extent? I would suggest per the CDC and state guidelines for this, but that'll be your call. Again, personal protective equipment. What are we making them wear? If we're requiring face masks and gloves, are we going to have them available for the visitors who come in who don't have those? These are things we need to set in place before we allow the visitor to enter. Then we need to set social distancing reminders while we're working with that. Because again, people coming from different states may not be familiar with what you're requiring either per New Jersey or PA or your particular company in mind. So we want to make sure that we communicate that clearly with them. And the biggest thing we really need to do is document all visitors, just in case there should be a flare-up or a breakout that is linked to your facility. You can either trace it back to a visitor, or if it's an employee, somehow they can let the visitors know. But we need to keep those records in the loop, just in case there should be something that occurs. Okay. All right. What resources are we going to need to sustain our daily operation? So let's look at that. When it comes to personal protective equipment, as I said earlier, this is where we'll talk about this a little more in depth. First thing we need to decide is what personal protective equipment we're using. We need to know how much of it do we need to sustain our daily operation. And the first place is, do we even have enough to reopen, let alone keep our daily operation going? Then we need to decide, hey, can we get it with suppliers? We've all heard the stories and the nightmares about getting different supplies throughout the supply chain. Can we get our personal protective equipment in the quantity enough to sustain our operation? Who's getting it? This could be something that falls through the cracks quite easily, and we don't want that. We don't want to look up and all of a sudden realize we don't have face masks, and everybody starts doing the finger pointing. Well, I thought he was getting it. We need to make sure that that is determined before we open up and start getting back to this new normal. And then how fast can we replenish it? Again, with the supply lines. Is that something that we can get on a continuous basis for what we need in order to be able to sustain that operation?
Phil, there's one thing too. I just was interacting with a business this morning, a processor specifically, who, and maybe you've seen this in other processing facilities, but for where they didn't have the ability to social distance within the operation, just from a production standpoint, they were able to position clear plastic barriers between employees in more, I guess, packed processing type areas as a best practice, just to try to eliminate, obviously, anything going back and forth, since they weren't 6 feet apart. I don't know if you've seen that before, and certainly was impressed when I heard it with what this processing facility was doing.
Yes, we have seen that as like we're going to get to later on, is some things that are working. And that is one of the things that we have seen and we have heard from our processors, and even things, I'm pretty sure everybody's seen them at the grocery stores, banks, drive-throughs, things like that, is the plastic partition when we can't keep the social distancing, when we need those 3 or 4 people on the processing line right at that pinch point or that production point. Yes, things such as the glass barriers, the plexiglass little wraparound cages have been very effective for this as a means of helping with the social distancing, or lack thereof, the ability to social distance. Okay, again, resources, we're continuing on this. Cleaning supplies, as we talked about the sanitation process in the office facilities, are we able to keep those cleaning supplies on hand in the quantities we need? Cleaning services expectations, I touched on this earlier. You may need, if you have a cleaning service or a sanitation crew that comes in, you may need to talk to them and say, hey, things have changed. We need, instead of X, Y, and Z, now we need X, Y, and Z plus A, B, and C. Those are things that may need to be ironed out on the front end to protect you and your employees as you return. Right. Evacuation and shelter in place emergency procedures. In your emergency action plan, those may need to be adjusted to allow for social distancing. Where before, if you were sheltering in place, everyone may have gathered in one internal room or a conference room type facility. Now with social distancing, we may need to relook at that. How can we shelter in place but spread out to accommodate some social distancing, if not complete social distancing, to allow during these emergencies? And during an evacuation, again, instead of clustering in one area, the spreading out to allow for social distancing. Some things that we've looked at, we've talked to other production and other account facilities that I didn't think of, but they brought up a good plan, is the HVAC systems. What are we doing? Are we pulling in fresh air from the intakes? Are we using recirculation? Per the CDC guidelines and a couple other things, depending on the facility, is what they're recommending. Once you receive this later on this thing, there is a link below that does have some guidelines that may help you answer those questions, along with the expertise of your facilities department if you have one. Okay, organization-wide considerations. All right, what have we done to date? Have we documented it? What practices are working? What's not? Are we working close? I know a lot of the food processors I work with through the Sustain program actually talk to each other quite a bit and bounce ideas off of each other. Some of these things are, what is working, what's not, how can we keep it going? All right, phasing re-entry per, most of you are in New Jersey, the New Jersey governor, or PA governor standpoints. CDC guidelines, what are they recommending we do? All right, we need a response plan for dealing with suspected and confirmed cases. What happens if we suspect an employee or a visitor had the COVID-19 virus? What happens when we confirm that they do? What is our policy and procedure going to be for that? All right. We also need to look at the impact of excess unused time off. Right now, a lot of people are working from home. What are we going to do when they open back up and now employees are permitted through different policies either to have their time off, carry it over, different things like that they didn't use during this pandemic that they normally would have? Do we have a plan for that impact? Okay. All right. Do we have exceptions in place for different employees? Again, through all the guidelines, our high-risk employees, our older health condition employees, do we have a way we can make exceptions for them? Can they still continue to work from home? Do we have different operations that they can do that kind of excludes them from the general employee population? Then employees who are just afraid to return to work, they can't, they're scared. They may have conditions. Someone in their home may have conditions that make them a high-risk employee. And then employees facing challenges with returning to work, childcare. This whole thing is set up, with the school systems. They continue to not know what's going to continue in the fall. They take care of elderly parents or high-risk people in their home. They're facing these challenges of returning to work. Are we going to put exceptions in place for them? And if so, what are they going to be? Again, things we need to consider. All right. What we know is working. I've talked to several of our food processors through the Sustain program, and these are some things that we have seen work out there for them. They've stepped up sanitation policies and programs. Again, where they would clean, different sets of times, they're upping that. They're cleaning more, they're cleaning deeper. Office facilities are getting cleaned more regularly. All right. They've gone down to only 1 or 2 entry points of the facility. This allows for wellness monitoring. It helps them understand and see and talk to the employees who are coming in, and allows the employees to raise a concern before they get out on the plant floor. It helps keep that contained. Again, the wellness checks at the entry points. the temperature taking just to verify. An employee say, hey, I feel fine, I don't have a temperature, and they may not even realize it. So those are different things that we know have worked. I have had one who's I won't say caught, but we're able to verify that one or two employees who came in looked perfectly healthy, said they felt perfectly healthy, didn't have a problem, but had a fever. So, they had to make adjustments for that.
And
So,
Phil, related to that, when someone's coming into a facility, whether it's processing or just, a regular business in general, if you're doing a temperature check and someone does feel fine and it looks heightened above the recommended, temperature, from there, what is your recommendation from there? In terms of, my understanding is that having a setup to go to send that person to an OC Health Center where they could get a general medical checkup and let a healthcare professional provide the actual medical guidance from there. Is that recommended from your point of view? Are you seeing that?
I have not seen that. What we do is we're leaving it up to each individual facility of how they want to handle that from the employee and legal standpoint. That would be more for their HR and management team to set that policy of what they want to do. But yes, it would be proper to, probably one of the things that would be a good suggestion is to have them checked out by a medical professional just for their safety alone.
Right. Thanks.
And then again, what we're getting back to, we are seeing work is the protective equipment. As Shawn stated earlier, the plexiglass screens, when social distancing can't be avoided, are achieved. And we can't avoid putting 2-3 employees in the same area. Face masks, gloves, these all have worked. We've seen it, and we've had regular documented cases through both production and regular facilities of essential employees that have truly made a great difference. Things we also know are working, distancing where possible. Again, if you're not close within the recommended distancing, they've had several experiments, things that are proven that it helps. It reduces the risk of catching the virus or anything else. Teleconferences. We're all getting familiar with Zoom. We're getting familiar with the different ones. Just a phone call. Picking up the phone saying, hey, how are things going? And then lockdown on visitations, both external and internal visitations. We're keeping people isolated. We all like that personal contact at some point, but right now, maybe it just needs to be a phone call or an email instead of running down the hall to pop your head in somebody's office. Maybe we just want to pick up the phone or, shoot an email there.
Yeah, Phil, I think one thing, Phil, just to add on that, like, I know I made a comment about myself going to see a few clients, and generally how, I'm gauging is trying to use common sense, obviously, and I'm not going to, it certainly makes sense to use more phone calls and virtual type meetings. However, I'm in the service business, and I do have clients who want to see me and ask to see me. So from there, my potential, my response to that is, sure, I can. Tell me about your facility. Where can we meet? Do we have a conference area where we can properly social distance? I have a mask. Are you going to require me to use a specific mask when I come in? So it's all stuff that, I think probably most people out there are doing, but just, some general commentary. There's people like me out there who are going to be asked to go certain places. And I think as long as you're comfortable and can get a sense that the setup is appropriate, it's going to happen from time to time. But I think I know I am, and I'm sure, many other people on this call and are also getting used to the virtual world and seeing how it can be efficient when needed as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing, and please don't take that the wrong way. Nothing's ever going to replace that face-to-face contact. And I hope never to get away from that, especially with my accounts. That's one of the few things I really do look forward to is those face-to-face visits, getting in there, hands, boots on the ground, talking with them. But as this new normal starts up, we may have to look at, how can we do that where both that the client or the account, customer, supplier, whoever, and us as employees or businesses feel comfortable doing that and getting it done. So, some of the challenges we've witnessed with this, again, as with everything and any kind of change comes new challenges. Uh, One of the things we've seen is the fear factor of just employees being in the work environment, being out in public. How can we help reassure that with the morale of the employees, especially as essential employees, and we start bringing them back to work where they've gotten accustomed to working from home, and now we're telling them, no, you need to go out in public and come back into the office or facility or processing plant. How can we help them and keep their morale up while helping get rid of some of their fear? The challenges as we spoke about earlier, of older or high risk workers, how can we work with them to get them where they're safe during this time and being able to add to the production? Getting workers to show up for their shifts. Again, as we talked about, many workers may have challenges, childcare, elderly care, different people at home that may be high risk, or the employee may be high risk. That falls into that fear factor. How do we just get them to show up? And then maintaining a consistent supply of that personal protective equipment. Again, with supply chains being fractured here and there, how are we going to work through that? Is it a surplus that we stock up on? Do we have a reliable vendor that we can count on? Different things like that are some of the challenges we've seen our different processors facing and our different accounts facing right now. And I'm pretty sure off the hand that many of you guys can think of 20, 30, 40 more of them that you're just thinking right now is, oh my gosh, how are we going to get through this? Don't be afraid to reach out to contacts such as the Processors Association. Work as a team, say, I'm not sure how we're going to get through this. How did you get through it? Or different things like that is, hey, we found out that this worked really great. Let's share that information. Okay. Also, but one of the good things that has come out that as I've talked to different processors in the Sustain program is there's some new opportunities out there. These processors have found new suppliers that they hadn't worked with previously, that they found out through this have become really reliable suppliers. New customers. We have one processor who swapped a couple years ago from restaurant supply to e-commerce, and their e-commerce business has just exploded, allowing them to do different things, allowing them to expand different operations. Business expansion with new or unknown markets. That same supplier, they supplied ground beef as one of their products, and it was just a moderate thing that, as on their product list that they supply. But that has blown up so much that they're in the process of rebuilding on an expansion into their processing plant, that they've had to go back and redesign that expansion to allow for higher production of ground beef in this.
Phil, that even applies too. You talk about new business opportunity, even for associate members. I know of a member of the association who's involved in pest control, and they've been doing a lot. They've morphed into doing quite a bit of disinfectant, which gels into their world, and obviously there's a huge need rate at the current time for professional cleaning. So it's both on the processor side and the associate member side.
Yeah. Again, every business we're seeing new opportunities. Maybe not be something we've thought of in the past, but it's jumping out and providing because of the situation. And as we talk about our new normal for processors and associate members, we also got to look at this is becoming a new normal for different people, the public in general. They're finding that, hey, e-commerce may be easier than running to the grocery store 2 to 3 times a week. Now all of a sudden I click on, make my order, it gets delivered. My busy schedule, even when I go back to my new normal, my busy schedule, this may fit better. So there's different opportunities that may jump out for us, along with new business practices. All these are some opportunities that, we may not have seen coming out of everything we look as being bleak and bad. Maybe there are some cracks and rays of hope in there. Just different things to think about. And then Shawn, we're going to go ahead and turn it over for questions through the chat program.
Yeah, I don't have any current questions. One thing that came up, somebody asked about being able to access the recording of this in the future, and it's my understanding that it will be up on the New Jersey Food Processors Association website for future viewing, whether you want to share it with somebody else out there or just view it as a reference point based on some of the discussion that was just, or the presentation that was just completed. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to put them up. The one thing I was going to comment on, and I think what's from my perspective, just, the amount of data coming out now about, we're probably all tired of hearing about the new normal and now just even the returning to work and what that's going to look like. That's becoming overwhelming with the amount of emails flying around and just different content that's available.
Mm-hmm.
My recommendation, and Phil, if you have any, please speak up, but there's, find your favorite website, find some place to find good data, and you can clearly fill in where you feel there's a gap. I know Eastern Alliance has some really good information on their website specific to COVID-19. They have a specific section that was general common questions asked and just best practice type content. I know at Smith Brothers, we have a Survive and Advance, COVID-19 link. So, and I'm sure there's many other really good resources out there, but find one that works for you. Look at it periodically, because most companies that are staying up on things are updating content there regularly, and then fill in the gaps where you can. But definitely become educated, because I think it's going to be more important to all, not just the processors, but associate members alike, all businesses. It's something we got to pay attention to. And I'm not seeing any other questions. Phil, any other comments before we wrap this up?
No, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the New Jersey Food Processors Association for allowing us to put this together and present it to them. And all of you that are on the line, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. And yes, thank you as well. And Phil, great job. Anyone who has questions in the future, feel free to feed them to either myself or Phil or generally to the association. If we can try to find resources for you, we'd love to. And we'll continue sharing information as it becomes available.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shawn and Phil. And thank you everyone who attended. As Shawn mentioned, this recording will be up on our homepage. It'll be on our Facebook page, and assuming no technical snafus, we'll even make it into tomorrow's weekly newsletter. So hope everyone has a good day.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.